The roses fell from his hands, 24 perfectly arranged red roses hitting marble floors with a sound that somehow echoed louder than his fiancée's stiletto heel connecting with his mother's ribs. In that single frozen moment, billionaire James Morrison watched his entire world split in two. The life he thought he was building and the nightmare that had been hiding behind designer smiles and champagne toasts. What he did next didn't just end an engagement. It sparked a movement that would transform how the world treats its most vulnerable. This is not a revenge story. This is a reckoning. Before we begin this powerful journey, if you believe that true character is revealed not in public but in private moments, and that the greatest wealth is measured in loyalty and love, not bank accounts, then hit that like button, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and subscribe so you never miss stories that remind us what truly matters. Your support means everything. Now let's dive in. James Morrison was a self-made man in the truest sense. At 42, he'd built Morrison Tech Industries from a garage startup into a global empire worth $8 billion. Forbes called him the conscience of Silicon Valley for his ethical business practices and groundbreaking philanthropic initiatives. His company had revolutionized cloud computing security, making him one of the youngest self-made billionaires in America. But the real architect of his success wasn't sitting in any boardroom or featured in any magazine profile. She was 81 years old, suffering from arthritis that made simple tasks a daily challenge, and living in the east wing of his sprawling San Francisco estate. Elena Morrison had raised James alone after his father died in a construction accident when James was 7. Miguel Morrison had fallen from scaffolding on a high-rise project, leaving Elena with a first grader, mounting bills, and no safety net. She'd worked 3 jobs, cleaning offices at night, doing alterations from their tiny kitchen table, and selling her famous tamales from a cart on weekends at the Oakland Farmers Market, all to keep their tiny apartment and food on the table. She'd worn the same threadbare winter coat for 15 years, so James could have new shoes for school every fall. She'd never missed a parent-teacher conference, never forgot to pack his lunch with a handwritten note tucked inside, never let him see her cry even when the eviction notices piled up and the electricity got shut off. Everything James had, every innovation, every success, every dollar in his vast fortune, traced back to Elena's calloused hands and unbreakable will. She'd been his first investor, emptying her meager savings account to give him $847 for his first computer. She'd been his first employee, helping him pack and ship products from their apartment. She'd been his first believer when everyone else said a kid from Oakland with no connections and no pedigree would never make it in Silicon Valley. When he'd made his first million at 28, the first thing James bought wasn't a sports car or a luxury apartment for himself. He bought Elena a small house with a garden where she could grow her beloved roses, the flowers her own mother had tended in Guadalajara before immigrating to America. When he made his first billion at 35, he built that modest house into a sprawling estate where she'd never want for anything again, where she could live in comfort and dignity after decades of sacrifice. That's why on this particular October afternoon, James was coming home early with roses, her favorite, the deep red ones that reminded her of her mother's garden in Guadalajara, the ones she said smelled like home and memory and love. He'd just closed a major deal in Tokyo, a partnership worth $200 million, and caught an earlier flight because he knew she'd been feeling lonely. Elena had mentioned during their last video call that the house felt too big lately, too quiet. James had heard the unspoken message beneath her words. She missed him. He entered through the side entrance, the way he always did when he wanted to surprise her, the roses cradled carefully in his arms, like precious cargo. The house was quiet, too quiet for a Tuesday afternoon. Usually, he could hear music from the kitchen where the staff prepared dinner, or the gardener's leaf blower outside. But today, an eerie silence hung over everything. His fiancée Victoria's car was in the circular driveway, which was unusual for this time of day. She normally spent Tuesday afternoons at what she called her charity luncheons, though James had recently begun to notice she never came home with stories about actual charitable work. just gossip about who wore what designer dress and which socialite was allegedly sleeping with whose husband. Then he heard it. A voice he recognized but had never heard sound like this. Cold, venomous, cruel. You're pathetic, you know that. Sitting here every day like some burden everyone has to work around. James stopped, his heart pounding. That was Victoria's voice. Victoria, who kissed Elena's cheek at dinner parties. Victoria, who posted Instagram photos with hashtags like Family First. Through the conservatory doorway, he saw them. Elena was in her chair by the window, hands gripping the armrests, face turned away. Victoria stood over her, elegant in silk and tailored pants, her finger jabbing the air inches from Elena's face. "You're a relic," Victoria hissed. "A reminder of poverty that doesn't belong in this world. James built an empire, and you're just dead weight." "Victoria, please." Elena's voice was small, trembling. "Please, what?" Victoria's voice rose. "Please stop telling the truth. You've squeezed every drop of gratitude out of your son, but I'm going to be his wife, and I'm not spending the next decade watching you deteriorate in my home." "This is James's home," Elena said quietly, with more dignity than Victoria deserved. That's when it happened. Victoria drew back her leg, her $1,000 Louboutin heel glinting, and kicked. The heel connected with Elena's side, right below her ribs. Elena gasped, doubling over. The roses fell from James's hands. They hit the marble with a soft sound that echoed through the house. Both women turned. Victoria's face drained of color. Elena's filled with tears, not from pain, but from humiliation. James couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. He walked forward and knelt beside his mother. Her hands were shaking as she tried to straighten. He could see the red mark already forming where the heel had struck. "Mama," he whispered. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, mijo," she said, using his childhood name. "It's nothing." "Nothing?" James's voice came back all at once, loud, raw. He stood and turned to Victoria. "Nothing! James, listen to me." Victoria held up her hands. "Your mother has been impossible lately. She provokes me." "Get out." His voice was quiet now, deadly quiet. "What?" "Get out of this house. Right now." "You're overreacting. You have 5 minutes to take your purse and leave. If you're not out in 5 minutes, I'm calling the police." Victoria's expression transformed. The mask cracked. "You're going to throw me out? After everything? After 2 years of playing happy family with your pathetic mother and pretending your immigrant roots are charming instead of embarrassing? 3 minutes." Victoria grabbed her purse, her movements sharp with rage. As she passed, she leaned close. "You're choosing wrong. That old woman will be dead in a few years. I could have given you forever." James didn't respond. He stood still until he heard her car fade down the driveway. Then he turned back to Elena. She was crying silently. "I'm sorry, mijo. I didn't want you to know. I thought I could handle it." "How long?" James asked. "How long has this been happening?" Elena looked away, unable to meet his eyes. The shame was written across her face, shame that broke James's heart into 1,000 pieces. 6 months, maybe more. It started small. Comments about my cooking smelling too ethnic, about my accent being embarrassing around her friends, about how I didn't understand the culture of her social circle. Then she started forgetting to tell me about family dinners she was hosting, leaving me out of wedding planning meetings even though I asked to help. She'd rearrange my things in my own rooms, throw away my belongings, and claim the housekeepers must have done it. But the physical abuse, pushing, grabbing my arm too hard, and then finally the kicking, that started about 2 months ago. 2 months. James felt like he'd been punched in the gut. "She's been physically hurting you for 2 months and you didn't tell me." "You were happy," Elena said, and the simplicity of that statement devastated him. "For the first time since you were a boy, you were happy. You smiled again. You laughed. You talked about having children, about building a family, about the future with joy instead of just ambition. How could I take that away from you? How could I tell you that the woman you loved, the woman you wanted to marry and have babies with, how could I tell you she was a monster? James felt tears burning behind his eyes. By letting me know I was building that future with someone who was torturing you. Mama, there was no choice here. There was never a choice. They sat together as the afternoon light faded, James holding his mother's hand. The roses lay scattered on the marble floor, petals already beginning to wilt. Outside, the sun set over San Francisco Bay, and James Morrison made a silent vow. He would never again mistake polish for substance or performance for love. If you're feeling the weight of this moment, hit that like button now. What James does next changes everything. Within 24 hours, Victoria made her move. A carefully crafted Instagram post about moving forward with grace and vague references to incompatible values. She was good. She'd spent 2 years building her platform as his fiancée, and now she was pivoting seamlessly into the role of wronged woman moving on with dignity. The comments flooded in. Thousands of followers who'd watched their relationship unfold like a fairy tale now offered sympathy, asked probing questions, speculated wildly. Victoria responded to select comments with carefully vague references to discovering someone's true priorities and incompatible life visions. She was playing the game perfectly. She'd assumed James would follow the unspoken rules of their world, the code of wealthy people who air their dirty laundry through publicists and lawyers, who settle everything behind closed doors with NDAs and silence, who value reputation and image above messy, uncomfortable truth. But Victoria had made one critical miscalculation. She'd forgotten who she was dealing with. James Morrison had built his empire by refusing to play by rules that didn't serve justice, and he wasn't about to start now. 3 days later, he published a full-page op-ed in the San Francisco Chronicle, What We Hide Behind Closed Doors, a personal story about elder, abuse, family, and why silence kills. The piece was devastating in its simplicity. No accusations of Victoria's character beyond the facts he'd witnessed. No dramatic language or embellishment. Just a son describing in clear, unflinching prose how he'd almost failed his mother by being too blind to see what was happening under his own roof. He wrote about the shame Elena had carried, about the 6 months of emotional torture and 2 months of physical abuse she'd endured in silence because she didn't want to disrupt his happiness. And then he issued a call to action that resonated far beyond his personal story. He challenged readers who suspected elder abuse in their own families, in their communities, anywhere, to speak up, to report it, to refuse to let silence be complicity in cruelty. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, the story had gone viral, not because of James's name or his billions, but because it was raw, real, and uncomfortably honest in a way that public figures rarely allowed themselves to be. Thousands shared their own stories. The hashtag #SeenHeardProtected began trending. Victoria's narrative collapsed overnight. Her Instagram post now looked like calculated damage control. By week's end, she'd lost half her followers and deleted her account. But James wasn't paying attention to Victoria anymore. He'd said what needed to be said, exposed what needed to be exposed. Now his focus was entirely on Elena, and on ensuring this nightmare never happened to anyone else's mother, father, grandparent, any vulnerable elder suffering behind closed doors while the world looked away. He started with his own company, and he started immediately. Within weeks, Morrison Tech had completely restructured its employee benefits package to include comprehensive elder care insurance that covered in-home care, nursing facilities, and legal advocacy. He implemented generous paid family leave specifically for employees caring for aging parents or relatives. He created subsidized in-home care services and established an elder abuse hotline that employees could call anonymously for resources, support, or to report suspected abuse. His executive team initially questioned the cost. James's response was simple and non-negotiable. If we can't take care of the people who built the generation that built us, then what's the point of all this wealth? Then he converted an entire floor of Morrison Tech headquarters into the Elena Morrison Elder Advocacy Center, a free resource hub offering legal counsel, social services, and support groups for families dealing with elder abuse. Elena initially protested. "Mijo, you don't need to do this. It's not over for thousands of elderly people suffering in silence," James replied. "If putting your name on this saves even one person, it's worth it." The center launched 3 months after the incident. Elena stood beside James as he cut the ribbon, her hand trembling as she held the scissors, overwhelmed by the crowd of supporters, advocates, and media who'd gathered. When the small crowd applauded, she wept, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that her suffering, her pain, her shame, all of it had been transformed into something with purpose, something that could help others avoid the nightmare she'd endured. The local news covered the opening. Then, the national news picked up the story. Within weeks, James was being invited to speak at healthcare conferences, to consult with lawmakers about strengthening elder abuse protections and closing legal loopholes, to share his family's story as a catalyst for systemic change. Other tech leaders began reaching out, asking how they could implement similar programs at their companies. The movement was growing beyond anything James had imagined. Elena started speaking at support groups, sharing her story with a quiet strength that moved everyone who heard it. She didn't speak with bitterness or anger. She spoke with profound dignity about suffering, survival, and the importance of breaking silence. Her message was simple but powerful. Suffering in silence doesn't protect anyone. It only empowers abusers and isolates victims. Her authenticity resonated deeply with people who'd spent years feeling invisible and worthless. One evening, after she'd spoken to a packed room of elder abuse survivors, a woman in her 70s approached with tears streaming down her weathered face, her hands trembling as she reached for Elena. "You saved my life," the woman said, her voice breaking. "I was ready to just endure it until I died. I thought that was my only option. But hearing you say that we deserve dignity, that staying silent doesn't protect anyone, that our voices still matter, you gave me the courage to call my daughter, to finally tell her what her husband has been doing to me for the past 2 years." Elena embraced her, and in that moment, James, watching from across the room, understood something profound that shifted his entire perspective. Victoria had tried to make his mother invisible, insignificant, a relic of poverty to be hidden away and eventually discarded. Instead, Elena had become a beacon of hope, a voice for thousands who'd been silenced by shame and fear. That night, back at the estate, they sat in the conservatory where everything had shattered. Elena's roses, neglected during Victoria's abuse, were blooming again. "I used to think I was holding you back," Elena admitted, "that maybe Victoria was right." James took her hand. "Mama, you are my world. Everything I am is because you showed me what real strength looks like." "I'm proud of the woman you are," James replied, "and I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. You see it now. That's what matters." 6 months later, James received an invitation that would change everything again. The National Council on Aging requested Elena as keynote speaker for their annual conference. Elena was terrified. "I'm not educated like these people. What do I have to say?" "You have the truth," James replied. "That's more powerful than any degree." The conference was in Washington, D.C. James watched from the wings as his 81-year-old mother stepped onto a stage before 2,000 people. Her hands shook as she gripped the podium. Then Elena began to speak. "I thought if I stayed quiet, if I endured it, my son could be happy," she said. "But I was teaching him the wrong lesson. I was teaching him that love means accepting abuse." Her voice grew stronger. "My son chose truth over comfort. He chose my dignity over his convenience. He chose to see me not as a burden, but as worthy of protection." She paused. "If you are suffering in silence, please hear me. You matter. Your pain matters. Your voice matters." The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. People wept openly. Afterward, James found Elena by the window of their hotel room. "I never imagined the worst thing that happened to me could become purpose." "Mama," James said carefully. What if we expanded? What if we opened centers in every major city? That would cost millions. I have billions, and I can't think of a better way to spend them. Within a year, the Elena Morrison Elder Advocacy Network had 15 locations across the United States, from New York to Los Angeles, from Seattle to Miami. Each center operated on the same model: comprehensive support, radical accessibility, zero judgment. James personally visited each location during its opening, but more importantly, so did Elena. She traveled despite her arthritis, despite her age, despite her natural shyness, because she understood that her presence, her willingness to be vulnerable and visible, gave other survivors permission to speak up. But James didn't stop there. He leveraged his connections throughout Silicon Valley to create something revolutionary: an app called Safe Guardian. Working with UX designers who specialized in elder-friendly interfaces, he created a tool that allowed elderly people to discreetly report abuse, request wellness check-ins from trained volunteers, and access legal and medical resources, all designed with large buttons, simple navigation, and voice command options for those with limited tech experience, vision problems, or mobility issues that made typing difficult. The app included a panic button that looked like an innocent weather widget, allowing victims to alert authorities without their abusers knowing. It had a safe mode that disguised it as a recipe app or photo album. It connected users directly to local resources and could document abuse through secure, encrypted audio recordings that would be admissible in court. The app went viral not through traditional marketing campaigns, but through word of mouth and genuine need. Adult children downloaded it for aging parents. Caregivers recommended it to clients. Social workers installed it on their phones to help clients access services faster. Senior centers held workshops teaching elderly community members how to use it. Within 18 months, Safe Guardian had been downloaded more than 10 million times worldwide and was directly credited with helping authorities intervene in over 50,000 documented cases of elder abuse. But beyond the numbers were the stories. The grandmother in Minnesota who used it to escape her son's financial abuse, the elderly veteran in Texas who finally got help after years of neglect in a care facility, the widow in Oregon whose neighbor's abuse was stopped because she had a safe way to report it. James appeared on 60 Minutes, gave a TED Talk that was viewed 20 million times, and testified before congressional hearings about elder rights and the need for federal legislation with real teeth. But in every interview, every speech, every public appearance, he deflected attention away from himself. He talked about Elena, about the survivors, about the advocates and social workers doing the daily work of protecting vulnerable elderly people. He talked about the work that still needed to be done, the systems that still needed to change, the cultural shift that had to happen before society truly valued its elders. One letter came from an unexpected source, postmarked from Arizona and signed V. Elena, I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know that what you've built made me confront things about myself I'd spent my life hiding. I'm in therapy now, real therapy. You didn't just survive what I did to you, you transformed it. I hope you're healing. V-star Elena showed James the letter. What should I do? What do you want to do? I want to forgive her. Not for her, for me. Because carrying hate is exhausting, Elena wrote back, a short note acknowledging Victoria's message and wishing her well. Victoria never responded, but it didn't matter. Elena had released the last chain. 2 years after the incident, James stood in the garden watching Elena tend her roses. Mama, he called, there's someone I want you to meet. A woman emerged, younger than James by a few years, dressed simply in jeans and a sweater. Her name was Maria, a social worker at one of the advocacy centers. James had met her 6 months earlier when she'd presented a complex case that required additional advocacy funding. They'd talked for hours that day, not about wealth or business deals or the trappings of success, but about purpose and meaning, about family and what it truly means to care for someone, about the profound importance of choosing people who saw service as a privilege rather than a burden, who understood that true strength was measured not in dominance, but in compassion. They'd been dating quietly ever since, carefully. James had been wary, terrified really, of introducing anyone new into Elena's life after the Victoria nightmare. He'd questioned his own judgment, wondered if he could ever trust himself to see people clearly again. But Maria was different in every way that mattered. She didn't see Elena as an obstacle to overcome or a burden to tolerate. She saw her exactly as James did, as the foundation of everything good in his life, as someone worthy of honor and protection and love. Elena looked up as Maria approached. "Mrs. Morrison, I've heard so much about your garden. Would you mind showing me your roses?" Elena's face lit up. "Please, call me Elena." "And I'd love to." James watched them walk through the garden together, Elena pointing out varieties, Maria listening with genuine interest. That evening, Elena came to James's study. "I like her." "Just like?" Elena smiled. "I love her. She sees you the way you should be seen. And mijo, she saw me first. Before she knew who you were, she knew my story. And she cared." 6 months later, James proposed to Maria in the conservatory, the room that had once witnessed cruelty and now held only light. Elena was there when he knelt down. Maria said yes. But before she kissed James, she turned to Elena. "Is this okay with you?" Elena's eyes filled with happy tears. "Mija, you've been family since the day you started helping other mothers like me. This just makes it official." The wedding was small, close friends and family, held in the garden among Elena's roses. At the reception, Elena gave a toast. "When James was a boy, he used to ask what I wanted most. I always said, 'I want you to be happy, and I want you to be good.' Today, watching him marry a woman who embodies both, I know my prayers have been answered." Later, James found Elena sitting alone by the fountain. "Are you okay?" "I'm grateful," she smiled, "for the pain that taught us what love really looks like. For the heartbreak that led to healing. Even for Victoria. She showed us what we didn't want, and that clarity led us to what we did. You're a better person than I am, Mama. Anger is human, but staying in it would make us prisoners." Elena took his hand. "You've given me my voice back. You reminded me that I matter. It always had value, Mama. I just helped the world see what I've always known." 3 years after that terrible October afternoon, the network had grown to 50 locations in 40 states, with plans to expand internationally. Safe Guardian had been translated into 12 languages and downloaded in 32 countries. Elena had written 2 books, a memoir titled Seen, One Woman's Journey from Silence to Strength, and a practical guide for elder abuse survivors called Your Voice Matters, both of which became bestsellers. She'd testified before Congress, appeared on national television, and personally helped establish elder abuse task forces in 15 major cities. Her face had become synonymous with the elder rights movement. People recognized her at airports, in restaurants, on the street. They'd approach her with tears in their eyes, thanking her for giving them courage, for making them feel seen, for saving their lives or the lives of people they loved. But the numbers and the accolades weren't what mattered most to Elena or to James. What mattered were the letters, thousands upon thousands of them, handwritten on lined notebook paper and typed on computers, sent from every corner of the country and beyond. Letters from people who'd found the courage to speak up, to seek help, to refuse to suffer in silence. Letters describing lives saved, families healed, elderly people who'd reclaimed their dignity and their voice because Elena had shown them it was possible. James stood at his office window. On his desk sat a framed photo. Elena in her garden, holding a perfect red rose, smiling with profound peace. His assistant knocked. "Mr. Morrison, you have that conference call in 5 minutes." "Cancel it. I'm going home early. I want dinner with my mother and my wife. The meeting can wait." They can't. That evening, the 3 of them sat around the small breakfast nook. Elena had made mole, the smell filling the house with warmth. "I got a letter from a woman in Maine," Elena said. Her daughter used the app to get help, and she's safe now. She sent me this. Elena held up a hand-carved wooden rose. She said I helped her remember she deserved beauty in her life. You've helped thousands remember that, Maria said. Later, as Maria and Elena cleaned up, James stood at the conservatory window looking at the garden. The roses were in full bloom. He thought about the roses that had fallen that day. How in dropping them, he'd been forced to see clearly. How sometimes what looks like an ending is actually when real life begins. He found Elena asleep in her chair. James gently scooped his mother into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, but to him she carried the weight of the world. His world. The world she'd built with sacrifice and love. "Mijo," she murmured. "Shh, Mama. I'm just taking you to bed." He tucked her in, kissed her forehead. "I love you, Mama. Te amo, mijo. Always." James stood in the doorway, watching her settle into sleep, feeling profound gratitude. 3 years ago, he'd thought his life was perfect, but it had been built on sand, on image rather than substance. Now his life was real, solid, built on truth and love and integrity that didn't crumble when tested. He returned to the conservatory where Maria was watering plants. They looked out at the garden together, at the beauty that had grown from painful roots. "Thank you for seeing her," James said, "for seeing us." Maria leaned against him. "Your mom saved you as much as you saved her." "I know, she always has." The morning light grew stronger. Soon the house would wake fully. But for now it was just James and Maria, standing together in the quiet, exactly where they were meant to be. The sun reached the roses, and they bloomed even brighter, red petals unfurling to greet the new day. In the garden that had witnessed cruelty and healed through care, beauty persisted, truth prevailed, and love, real love, built on respect and protection and choosing someone's well-being over comfort, love won. Not because it was easier, but because it was right. What this story teaches us: the people who love us most may suffer in silence to protect our happiness. But real love doesn't require their silence. It requires our awareness, our protection, and our willingness to choose truth over comfort. James thought he was building a perfect life. Instead, he was building an illusion. When it shattered, he discovered something far more valuable, a purpose bigger than profit, a legacy measured in lives protected, and the understanding that the greatest empire is one founded on integrity and compassion. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button right now, drop a like, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment. Have you witnessed elder abuse? Have you found the courage to protect someone vulnerable? Thank you for watching until the end. Thank you for being the kind of person who believes protecting the vulnerable is everyone's responsibility. Remember, real character isn't revealed in public moments of performance. It's revealed in private moments of choice. Choose wisely. Choose compassionately. Choose truth. See you in the next one.